Hello, this is Scott Hall, and I am introducing video on my blog posts from this point on. These are now officially vlog. So today's post is about the current circumstances today in the geostrategic context, plus the situation leading up to the events of the last 12 days. So I'm going to briefly sort of title this as shock-proof farming, or why regenerative agriculture is the only solution. So bear with me. Okay, so we all know, particularly as farmers, particularly those who know a lot of conventional farmers, that the price of urea, ammonium nitrate, has, I think it's 1,000% increase before the last real stable trend line was on the chart. It's, look it up. I don't need to bore you with charts today, but if you're in the know, you know what I'm talking about, and if you're not, please pay attention because this is serious. The other thing is glyphosate. It's up over 300% in the last 6 months or so. It's just climbing, and this has all been a trend because of a lot of it's complexity, but it's diminishing returns on complexity. So the long and short of it is the system has been going through diminishing returns, and there's a scarcity element arising. The cost of production of glyphosate, because of the mineral inputs, etc., related to crude oil, which has gone up a lot, and it's quite a volatile oil market. But the last time I checked, Brent crude's well over $120 a barrel. And natural gas fields around the world are essentially peaked. There's not much room, and there's probably pretty much zero wiggle room for extra extraction to meet extra demand, etc. So the price is pushed right up. It was over 1,000 euros per 1,000 cubic meters before the war in Europe. And now it has over doubled, I believe. I may be wrong on this, but thereabouts, that's the trend I'm talking about. So we've got this situation where the market with the system, the structure, was failing. And we look, as regenerative farmers, we know about it. We understand these dynamics in the physical world. Now, on top of that, now what's happened is there is this geopolitical calamity, which is essentially call it what you will, but it's a battle of empire. It's Ukraine is obviously a victim in this, and but the interests, the stakes, it's more about the competing empires, for lack of a better word, than it is about some Eastern European country. We've had plenty of time to witness a lot of countries get destroyed in the last decade or more, and that's a very sad fact. And this is a game of empire that's harming a lot of innocent people that don't deserve any of this. And what can I say? Our leaders are psychopaths, all of them. I don't trust them. So that aside, we've got this shenanigans again, but it's a situation where there's economic warfare now, and the West and Western affiliated countries and NATO, anyone associated with that power structure, has put forward economic sanctions that are harming us more than they're harming the opponent. And what that's done is it's put so much pressure on these already fragile systems that supply the ammonium nitrate, which is natural gas, glyphosate, etc., diesel, and whatnot. And not only that, the other side, the supply side structure of the food system's undergoing a lot of stress, and every time there's a COVID mishap or a flood or something like that, there's a price shock and shortages, and it's not due to any one thing, it's the system. That's my viewpoint. So, on saying that, rising food prices, really serious rising food prices, and Oh, look, I'm just going to take one step back before I go back to that, to where I was going to go with the rising food prices. There's a lot of things that our leaders could have done, but what they did choose in relation to the geopolitical calamity is what they have done is they have chosen economic warfare at the cost of their own people and societies to try to get some upper hand for a reason that doesn't concern us and our well-being in our own countries. I'm not being a nationalist or anything like that. It's just plain speak that the kings and emperors care only about their position in power globally rather than who they're supposed to be looking after. And they've thrown us under a bus. So we're going to see more price shocks. We're going to see many more issues. Oil markets, gas markets. Ammonium nitrate is now a strategic resource. It's no longer just an expensive and very scarce, increasingly scarce commodity. It's now a strategic resource. And I believe the governments aren't going to do much to help us. They obviously haven't, because they've actually enacted something that's going to harm us. So we're faced with the prospect of food shortages and supply gaps and high prices. Everything that harms households and the ordinary people of any society. So yeah, high prices, etc. So what that does, obviously, pardon the wobbles, what that obviously is doing is it's affecting farming in a major way. Not only that, it's affecting the distributors and the network. You know, I've had agents calling me wanting food, to buy food from me. That rarely happens. People trying to secure food, their sources. So yeah, bad, not good, not a good sign when agents ring farmers the way they do, particularly farmers like me. Normally you have to chase the agent around. And but yeah, say we're getting high food prices. That doesn't mean much for the ordinary farmer or the conventional farmer, because they've got so much extra to pay in their inputs. Glyphosate, urea, which are the main inputs for our staples, our commodities, you know, soft commodities like wheat and barley, corn, sorghum, etc., rice. This is all the food that we all need to eat. It's a staple food, you know. It's not something that we can choose not to buy and just, you know, go without a few luxury items. These are everyday, day-to-day staples for all families, generally. So, faced with those input rises, the farmers they're not going to do much better either. We're not going to do very well either, because, you know, the margins are still getting chewed out. It's probably proportionate, but it's not looking good. And if there's a supply shortfall, you know, if we just, you know, the last time I looked at urea, there was a 6-week supply, and after that there was looking at a 2-week supply. So we're living almost hand to mouth with our urea. This is really, really serious, and I'm positive that sort of realization hasn't spread through our society yet, but it's sure to, in some form or another, in the coming months, unless something really weird happens and changes that dynamic really quickly. So we're in a bind, you know, like a lot of us farmers and a lot of other people around farming and a lot of people that are not around farming who are, you know, got some reasonable, you know, ability to analyse the situation objectively without having it being politicised, can work out that there's a serious issue with you know, limits. There's limits. So things are getting worse now. So you know, to summarise this first point, you know, this war has been going on 12 days. Everyone's freaking out. I'm not talking about the population in general or the media. I'm talking about the politicians and the big decision makers and the people in the high office in the ivory towers. They're freaking out. You know, they've, like I said, they've put together sanctions that are harming us more than they're harming the opponent. I don't trust those people. I don't see much competency in those decisions. So, and obviously I see that their interests lie elsewhere, like I previously stated, outside of the well-being of their populace. So I am going to again push the case for regenerative agriculture. Now, it's the only way out of this bind, because it produces food without the ammonium nitrate, without the glyphosate, with not so much diesel. Now I will stop here and I'm going to specify something. Organic agriculture is a bit different because it's very heavy in diesel input. The diesel may not happen at the farm, but there's a lot of diesel and energy input on the front end of the products that are purchased from the rural suppliers that go into growing food organically. Yes, it's organically certified, but there's a lot of industrial energy on the input side of organic agriculture. If you're buying compost by the ton, it's made with a lot of diesel. It's diesel. You're pretty much transforming diesel back into organic matter again and taking it to a farm. The manure, the pelletized manure, most of it's made out of chicken manure from battery hen farms, which is the product of industrial agriculture, and the input of those battery hen farms are grains, which are grown with ammonium nitrate and glyphosate. So I'm going to say organic agriculture plays an important role in this still, but it is prone to the supply shocks, the input side supply shocks that I mentioned. Maybe it's not as prone as direct application of glyphosate and ammonium nitrate urea. Maybe it's not, but I don't know how upstream all of those processes that end up as an end-use product for the farmer that go into organic farms is going to cope. Will we see supply shortages in compost because of the upstream problems? Will we see supply shortages of pelletized manure because of the grain issues on the front end of the battery hen operations? I don't know. But as somebody who's cautious as myself, and I'm fairly, you know, I mean business on the regenerative side of things, and that's where I don't want to dilute my purpose or my cause or my practice. I'm not going to water anything down as far as using inputs as much as I can. I want to stay as true to my cause and my practice as I can, and that brings us to regenerative agriculture and why I believe this is one of the only way out of the bind for increasing food scarcity. Now, regenerative agriculture will, to some extent, need inputs from industry. Electric fencing. You know, we can go back to herding, yeah, but we're not going to set stock cattle on range. That's destructive. Set stocking is not regenerative agriculture. We must move the herds at the right time. The cattle must be in the right place at the right time for the right amount of time for the right reason. There needs to be the right recovery of grass there for them. You know, I'm an agroforester. I do syntropic agriculture, although I am combining both of them more and more and supporting others to combine both to get the maximum effect, more than the sum of the parts when both of them are combined. That's, I believe, the future, where we're going. I still use a chainsaw. I still buy secateurs. Sure, that's an industrial input, but day-to-day fixed costs, we don't use stuff from the shop. We use the ecology. That's what makes a regenerative agricultural enterprise. Is it's ecologically driven. Now, this isn't as easy as it sounds. It's not an out-of-the-box solution. It's deeply context related. Its success depends on the decision making and the management of the farmer. But there's a lot of support out there, and there's a lot of training out there. And if you dedicate yourself to that, and support regenerative agriculture, or you support a farmer in that way, then yeah, you will attain all of that skill set. It's doable, but it's not, you don't ring up an agronomist and get told what the best thing to do is with Regen Ag. You're completely responsible for what happens on your land. You can be coached, you can get support, consultations, etc., and it all adds up to you being a better farmer. But it's up to you and what is growing around you. It's about that sunshine falling on your property every day and what you're going to do with it, how you're going to turn that into biomass, and how that biomass is then going to be managed into an outcome which will end up as your product. It will end up as the product that we feed people with. Again, it's shockproof. So that's the big point of my talk today. Is this, and we can't switch to this quickly. This is a really, really important point. It's just something that we cannot in any way just turn on when we need to. Once you take away that nitrogen, whether it be from pelletized manure on an organic context, an organic farming context, or compost that you're importing, quick segue, to make your own compost to support the type of organic production that organic is, that's standard now, that's just not easy, near impossible to do in a quick response, and most farmers don't do it because it's generally largely unviable. But going back to where we were, we can't turn this around and turn it on. So like I said, if we don't have that nitrogen available to us, we have to start managing an ecology to produce that nitrogen. That's what we have to do, whether we use animals or plants or a combination of both. We don't just turn it on or open a bag. And it takes a long time to recover destroyed land, which most of the land is absolutely destroyed. It might look like good country, it might be good soil when you add the stuff and things grow, but when you don't add the stuff, that's when you know how bad it is. And I've been around long enough to see that there's pretty much no ground that you can just plant in without fertilizer or accumulating nitrogen and phosphorus, etc. So we've got to find some way as a community and as a society now to support Regen Ag, understand its really strict requirements for function. It needs to generate these inputs in situ through photosynthesis. It needs to grow plants, and this is going to take things like, this takes things, I've done it, this is how it works. It needs things like species succession and management of some of the plants that we would all walk past and not care about. But suddenly when we need to make our own nitrogen through syntropic methodology, holistic management if you're using cattle, but syntropic methodology is another new way of doing it without the cattle, we suddenly see the importance of every single plant and how it works in context with giving us that nitrogen. Don't just walk along and say, oh, that's a useful plant, it does this, and it does this. No, that's old school. That's out of context. It's isolating the plant and lauding it. Great, yes, it is a good plant, but we need to understand its role in your context, in the paddock, and how it's working, or how it will work, to get you that base, or the nitrogen, to grow your crops. We need a lot more knowledge about it and how to implement it and use and manage that plant, rather than just know all about it on an academic basis, or a whole big spiel about how great that plant is, or how much I know about that plant. No, we need not just that. We need to know how to implement that plant and get those desired outcomes. And that's where syntropic agriculture is excellent. It allows us to put it into a consortium, what we call a consortium, which puts it into function with other plants, moves through species succession, gets us our nitrogen. So to top it all off, this is where I'm going to go back, is we're looking like, things aren't, we all knew that we were moving towards the point where this, industrial systems weren't going to support us. I think we've had a bit of a wake-up call, so I'm really happy to engage in dialogue on YouTube. on Facebook, on my blog, to discuss how this could happen. I'm really super keen to further collaborate with other consultants, growers and teachers and farmers. I'm wide open to other farmers to work with possible outcomes, putting the macroorganism, as we call it in syntropic agriculture, but putting that large quorum soil food web network back on a highest level of power, back into wheat fields, orchards, etc. Let's keep having the conversation. Let's everybody have the conversation. Let's all have a look at the things around us now, and let's ask ourselves as a society, how are we going to get through this together?